Hello and welcome back to the Card Pool. I'm your host Stu.
And I'm Kyle.
And today we're looking at part 2 of the hidden gems that we found in Champions of Kamigawa.
Yes indeed, this is part 2 of our Hidden Gems series. For a look at part 1 and the numbers 10 through 6 that we already looked at, you can take a look back at our previous video, wherever that one is. I don't know, is it up there?
It's the blip over here, but yeah, they got it. But so for right now, we're going to just go ahead and jump on in.
Yeah, well, I guess you're first.
So at my number 5, we have a very interesting card called UBA Mask. It costs 4 mana for this artifact, it's 4 generic at that, and it reads, if a player would draw a card, that player removes that card from the game face up instead. Each player may play cards he or she removes from the game with UBA Mask this turn. So this seems kind of counterintuitive of why you'd want to do this.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I don't get it. I really don't get it. What's going on here?
Oh, my fairy woodland friend, I'll tell you. Pretty much what this is really good for being is, we all remember Leovold when it was back in Commander, and that was a very oppressive card. The more you wield, the more that you would discard and draw cards, your looter effects, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you can still do that now because Narset Parter Avails is a thing.
That
and it's
is.
doing it all over again.
But this inherently can make it so it hurts your opponent. So for example, if you were to go ahead and play like a Teferi's puzzle box, the player would go ahead, put their cards away, and then all the cards that they would draw get exiled instead. Sure, they can draw them, but what if you take it away on their turn? If you go ahead and you use like a memory jar, on your turn, you go ahead, you make it so everyone loses these cards, draws cards, they all get exiled. None of them can cast them once you end your turn because they are exiled, they can't be used, they are still exiled with this card, but they have officially got 0 cards in their hand.
So not having cards in a hand could actually be useful, I guess, if you're playing some kind of strategy with a lot of Hellbent cards. There are some good ones, and not having a hand, I guess, would be all right, but the only way I see this, it feels like you're just slowing down your draws and giving everyone public knowledge of what's in everybody's hand, which could have its advantages sometimes.
Well, also, one thing to note, this removes the graveyard from the game, which a lot of decks are reliant on. Secondly, if you are very commander heavy, this also won't affect you because inherently you'll be using your commander's effect if anyone else is petering out. And thirdly, like if you use a lot of wheeling, it doesn't matter what deck color you're in, you can use this and go ahead and make people wheel or draw or discard or whatever you want to do along with it, because if they were to go ahead and use like an Oblation, for example, you go ahead, you put a permanent into their deck, they go ahead, they shuffle it up and they draw 2 cards from it, well, those 2 cards are exiled, and if they're lands, they're gone. If it's sorceries, they're gone. Creatures, planeswalkers, they're gone. They're not going to be able to use it because it's not their turn, inherently giving them nothing. They net nothing. As Willy Wonka said, you lose, you get nothing.
Well, they could always play them when it comes back around to them.
Well, no, it's for the turn. It's only for this turn. So any other turn after it ends, it all washes away.
How do you figure that?
It says it on the card.
Does it?
Right there.
Each player may play cards this turn.
Exactly. So inherently, you can make it so you get the advantages, you strip their hand down, and you get everything.
Interesting.
So if you use something like the Sanitarium, the Insanas, whatever the land is, you go ahead, you make it everyone draw, or even a Temple Bell for that matter. You go ahead, you tap it, everyone draws a card, they will collectively groan, because they will get nothing and you will get the advantage there. So it's deceptively, I don't know, very powerful. It's like a nuke, more or less.
That's still really weird. I mean, it is a little better than I thought, but it's still really weird. I don't know when you would use this. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad I broke you.
Good question.
I'm really glad I broke you. If you guys have any spot, I think it'd be really great in a Wheels deck or something like that that doesn't use the grave. But, let us know down below just so I can... Jeez, you broke me. Let's just go on to the next card. Number 5 from Kyle.
All right, whatever. Let's go on.
Jeez.
Well, number 5, I've got Condas Banner, another artifact here. This one, a little bit easier to wrap your head around, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's a legendary equipment. You don't see too many of those, although we are seeing more. Can only be attached to a legendary creature. Hello, Commander. However, creatures that share a color with the equipped creature get +1/+1. Creatures that share a creature type with the equipped creature get +1/+1 as well. So this one... honestly, this is not really an equipment meant for a Voltron deck. This is an equipment meant for a lot of other decks. Maybe a tribal deck, maybe a token deck, something like that. because it doesn't boost your, I mean, I'm going to argue it's probably your commander you're equipping, but it doesn't boost whoever is equipped with it. It boosts everything else around it.
Well,
however, yeah, there are some situations
I was telling Kyle about this. So the Oracle rules on this card is actually a little interesting. Initially, if your commander has 2 colors, inherently it shares a color with itself. So if it's Boros, it shares white or red. So it can get a +1 boost as long as you're outside of mono. Very bizarre on Wizards for this one. And also, if a creature goes ahead and matches a color and a type of this, it can only get a max of a +2, no matter how many colors and creature types it goes ahead and matches with. It has a cap of getting a +2/+2. So right there, just think about it as for that standard. However, it's still really strong. For 4 mana, getting a bigger Anthem than you normally get from anywhere else in Magic is still pretty strong, and it could be a fatal blow in the game.
Yeah, this card is so difficult to find. Like, I have such trouble finding it available anywhere, but if it weren't so hard to find, I would probably play it in almost all my commander decks because it is that awesome.
And also for the fact that it is legendary. Legendary is a lot more tutorable now than it was before, especially with like Thalia's Lancers, Captain Sisei, the old school one, and I mean there's even more that come out all the time. So,
nice boost, very cheap to play and equip. I'm all about this one.
Yeah, and I mean it's going to have a home in Commander for as long as we care about legendaries.
Definitely.
But moving off of that one and on to my number 4, this is another one to make you wrap your head around something a little bit differently, but not as intensely. It is a creature called Misako the Humorless, if I'm saying that right. It costs 3 mana, 2 generic, and a white for a 2/1 legendary creature human. And this guy / girl, whatever it is, makes it so you can play this card at instant speed, which is very powerful, one on a commander or just a card in general. Secondly, if we go ahead and bring the picture back up real fast, it has the ability to make it so that your tapped creatures that you control can block as though they aren't untapped. So you might be thinking initially that this is very similar to Vigilance, but it's not, and I will actually argue it's better, because inherently with Vigilance, yes, you attack, you can go ahead and you can still block. But this doesn't work for when you go ahead and use a tap effect, something like a Mother of Runes, for example.
Right.
So where would this stand out in Magic? Well, ever since we went to Kaladesh, we saw vehicles.
You totally stole that from me, by the way.
No, I thought about this one, but no, legit vehicles, you go ahead and you pay the crew cost, which you don't have to have haste to do, and you can now go ahead and make it so that you can go ahead and utilize the creature you just crewed into and the ones that made it so it can be piloted.
Exactly.
Very powerful.
Mono white vehicle commander, I'm into it. I would do that.
And also, anything that you have is like a tap effect. So something like a rune, for example, which has Vigilance, which is awesome. You still want to use the tap effect. But depending on what comes out, you might have to use the tap first before you can go in and block for combat step. Being able to still have it as a blocker is really nice.
Right, and this basically means all your creatures can block all the time, regardless of what you do with them. So it's pretty great, and adding Flash onto that too, to just completely flip the entire dynamic of combat on its head is pretty cool.
So I don't necessarily think
card.
that this is a card as a commander. It could be, but I think it's more of a staple for something like a Saram deck that you would see out there that cares, if it does care about vehicles, or if you go ahead and you swing out very big with the Voltron, you now have it as a potential blocker later down the line.
I mean, I would do it. There's the Pilot Dwarf, which is the only real vehicle commander. But that's boring. Do this instead. Be more creative.
I guess I did steal the crewing from you. But either way, moving on to your number 4, Kyle.
Yes, and this one kind of goes without saying, but it is one of the technically hidden gems because it's not really a money card. It's been reprinted a million times.
So maybe we shouldn't say it.
Now, Asami Lady of Scrolls is the one. I do think it's absolutely worth a mention. So it's a 0/2 from a 5 mana creature with a hefty 3 blue mana cost. So the legendary creature, and it's a human wizard. Tap an untapped wizard you control to draw a card. It's really simple. It's very small and fragile for its mana cost.
Yeah.
But tapping any wizard, including herself, to draw a card, regardless of whether or not they have summoning sickness or anything like that, is beyond nuts.
Yes.
This is one of the most popular commanders in the competitive version of our favorite format for a good reason. It is that nuts.
I don't know if it's the most, but it definitely is one of the more broken effects because it's just flat out anything that happens to be a wizard or a changeling that can be a wizard, you're just drawing a card. It costs you like no mana. You just bloop, I'll draw a card, and it's continuous as long as those creatures are on the field. So like you're netting so much advantage over your opponents in this spot. It's just ridiculous.
It's especially in a tribe with a ton of cheap creatures and counter magic, the best color for control. It's very, very easy to find a combo that can just let you draw your deck and win.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
When Paradox Engine was in the game, this was stupidly broken.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it still is pretty broken, but that was even worse.
Or even like a Prophet Crew Fix, like you just go ahead, all right, even if you don't cast anything out, or like a Seedborn Muse, if you still somehow are able to put green into it, like just being able to like, all right, you end your turn, I'll just tap everything down and draw 8 cards. I don't have to discard, it's not my turn. That alone is just something crazy. So, and this is forever a piece of solid Wizard Tribal right there. It's just so strong.
So, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about Asami. It's just really good. I had to mention it.
But now moving on to my number 3, if you don't mind. Another more head-scratcher that I'll have, and that is a horrible sentence. It's called Night Dealings. Now, this is a 4-drop enchantment. It costs 2 generic and double black. And it reads, whenever a source you control deals damage to another player, you may put that many theft counters on Night Dealings. Secondly, if you go ahead and you pay the card's cost, so 2 generic and double black, again, remove X counters that are put onto this, and search your library for a non-land card with converted mana cost X, and reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this literally is a Diabolic Tutor as an enchantment that can be reused. And the only thing you have to do is put damage on the board. So this is something... Honestly, if you ever played a Rakdos Lord of Riots deck, you're always dealing out damage because that's the only way you can cast your commander. Right. This is a great way to put counters on real quick to make it so that you can go ahead and tutor out for whatever you need as long as you just know the mana cost that it is.
Yet also, Endrixar Master Breeder makes black tokens a thing. And then there's also Sir Conrad the Grim, which is probably the best new way of using this card. And Stu and I have had many discussions about whether or not this card merits inclusion in a deck like that. And my thing is, look, do I recognize this could potentially be really powerful? Yes. I really want to like this card so bad. But I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to sit there and let this stay on the board and give you how God knows however many free tutors. It's not going to happen. They're going to kill it on site.
It depends on your board state. All right, before we even start to dive in with our reasons, I'll do a poll. Who's right? Who you siding with? Is it Stu? Me? It's definitely me, or this guy.
I just don't believe in committing something to the board that's going to immediately get destroyed.
You explained your point. It is totally my point now. All right, so it's a reusable tutor, all right, continuously. And depending what you have on the board, you can go ahead and, like, you play this, you go to combat, swing out, do a lot of combat, and then, bam, you got all these counters on there for you to use. It works with proliferating, which is definitely a thing, whether you're in Planeswalkers or not, just for what you can potentially do with all these counters that you can put out there, like in Hapatra, for example.
Yeah.
And secondly, it isn't at sorcery speed. You can just go ahead and you can tutor before this thing gets destroyed. And you can go ahead and do it multiple times over and over again.
It takes a lot of mana to do that, though.
It takes 4 mana.
8 if you want to use it the turn it comes out. Let's be realistic here. I'm just trying to be a realist.
Let's be realistically, Cabal Coffers, Magus of the Coffers, you got Black Ritual spells, you got anything you really want, because it's
There's
black,
a lot of
black
conditions that have to be met for this.
There's
a lot of conditions. Let's be clear, there are a lot of conditions that have to be met for this to be as good as you think it is.
There's not that many conditions. It's conditioner, Kyle. You just put it in, you're happy, and you're all done.
Well, my point, like I said, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Things have to have, it's unfortunate, but the nature of the game these days is that things have to have some kind of immediate impact when they hit the board or they are not good. I'm sorry, it's true.
I don't think you understand what nature is, but either way, we're going to go on to number 3. To an actual thing of nature, we'll go on to another number.
Yes, well, speaking of things that have immediate impact...
Because I can't just let you explain how wrong you are over and over again.
Well, I'll show you how right I am with this card.
Okay.
Godo Bandit Warlord is my number 3, and this is a pretty sweet choice for Commander itself. It's 6 mana, so again, kind of pricey for a legendary human barbarian, and it's a 3/3, so not all that big either. But when Godo enters the battlefield, you can search your library for an an equipment card, and put it into play. If you do, shuffle your deck. When Godo attacks for the first time each turn, untap it and all samurai you control. After this phase, you get an additional combat phase. So this is a very interesting card.
Definitely.
So it doesn't help itself because it is not a samurai.
No.
So you're not going to get more than one extra combat from this guy, and it probably made him exactly for that reason. However, the fact that you can, for 6 mana, get any equipment you want from your deck right into play, and then have a 3/3 guy along with it, is pretty good. So you could automatically equip this and get, if it's like a Lightning Greaves or something, get at least 1 extra combat that turn. However, the reason this is worth noting and the reason it really shines is because we now have an equipment called Helm of the Host from Dominaria.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, which when you equip it to this card, if you have enough mana to do that immediately, you just win the game.
More or less.
Because you get, with infinite tokens, you gain infinite combat steps. And yeah, like I said, those two cards together, it's almost impossible to stop. So
it's a very strong
yeah.
card. One for the tutorage, because red doesn't have a lot of tutorage. This is really good in Boros. It's really good just as is. Getting the additional combat step doesn't always happen, and we do see easier ways of going ahead and getting additional combat steps.
Oh,
we see
definitely.
that, like Neheb is more or less the poster child of additional combat steps now with an easy enchantment to cast out. But this is a very good card to take note of. It can work as a commander if you're going for an easy kind of style like this. And to get the mana isn't incredibly hard. There are red rituals, that's not easy to say, to get you there quicker than your other opponents. So, yeah, take note. It's useful.
Yeah, it's got, like I said, things gotta have some value when you play them. Otherwise, it's just really tough to justify including them. And I feel bad about that, but it's true.
Also to note, changelings are a thing, which we've said before,
True.
so that does make a thing with the whole thing. I'm just going to keep ignoring it. Number 2 for Stu is an awesome card called Nature's Will. It is a 4-drop enchantment. A 4-drop enchantment, Kyle. Just throwing that out there. It costs 2 generic and double green. And it reads, whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, tap all lands that player controls, and untap all lands that you control. So this is a very good kind of equivalent exchange, even though it isn't an equivalent exchange. But you are able to go ahead and make it so that you can get additional mana without having to wait for Seedborn Muse to go off. This is a very powerful effect for if you're going wide with tokens, you should be getting more mana. And if you go ahead and you hit other players, inherently you would get this effect more than once, right?
Yeah, well, it's like Bear Umbra and or half of Sword of Feast and Famine, the better half of Sword of Feast and Famine, with the addition that neither of those cards do of tapping down all lands your opponent controls.
Yes.
This is, so I'm much hotter on this card than I am on Night Dealings, because this has a very good chance of doing something the minute it hits the board, because if you play this, odds are they're gonna have to waste some kind of counterspell removal on it when they really don't want to do that. Or you're going to attack them, tap down all their lands, and stop them from responding to anything you do. So that puts somebody in quite a bind, and I really, really do like this. Even if I think the mana cost is a little overcosted, whatever. I'd stick this in any green deck that likes to go to combat.
That is a very backhanded compliment, but I'll take it though. But this is something that is very strong if you are about trying to get all that sweet, sweet mana. If you're going for a Helix Pinnacle, this is very easy to go. If you could hit 3 players, because in response to the one, you use the 1 trigger on the stack, you tap all your lands out, build the mana cap, do with the other, same thing. You can get inherently, depending on how much mana you have, or if you have any kind of boosters out there that double your mana, you could potentially win with a Helix Pinnacle the turn that you play these out together.
Right. And what makes this better than like a Seedborn Muse or a Wilderness Reclamation that just sits there and untaps all your lands? Well, it's that tap down, I would argue.
And also, again, this works for Enchantress builds as well. So if you're going ahead and you are creating Enchantress tokens or anything else like this would work. A great example would be the green and black god that makes the snake tokens. They're little death touch guys.
Yeah.
So this would work really well with something like that, being able to get you that boost and keeping you lethal by having the chance to create more enchantment snakes.
Gonna have to think about that one, because I'm trying to work that deck right now.
Could flow with it, we'll see.
Like it.
But moving on to your number 2, Cal.
All right, well, my number 2 and number 1 are going to kind of speak for themselves. So number 2 on my list is none other than Kodamas Reach. Probably the best ramp card ever created in this game.
Yeah, poster child for Commander Green.
Yeah, because like I said, it's 3 mana, it's a sorcery, and it's an arcane, not that that ever really matters. But you search your deck for 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put one into play tapped, and the other into your hand, and then you shuffle your deck, of course. But I won't have much to say about this other than pretty much everybody knows this card.
Yeah.
There's also Cultivate is basically a reprint of this card minus the Arcane.
Totally
and
gonna say that.
And both of these cards are probably the best ramp spells in the game, just because that rate. You put a new land out there, an additional one, and then you guarantee you have a land drop the following turn. That's for 3 mana. That's just so good.
It's classic green, and it's a card so nice they made it twice. Cultivate, yeah.
Yep.
So
Green staple forever and ever.
Which is awesome because we usually only see this in like black or blue, so it's really refreshing seeing this in green. So thank you, Wizards. I appreciate it since I'm more green than this guy. But it's, yeah, great card, classic card, and I guess you could also say it's the Arcane that we're looking for.
Yeah,
but,
it is.
Moving on to my number one. I mean, there's not much more I can personally say about this one.
It's kind of boring, but I needed to mention it.
No, it's OG to the set, so I respect it. But my OG to this set is also another 3-drop. This time it is an artifact. It's called Honor Worn Shaku?
Shaku, I guess.
Yeah, it costs 3 generic, and it is pretty much a mana rock, but an interesting one.
I don't want to tell you what I think that looks like, but whatever.
Yeah. Kid-friendly show. All right, so you tap this, and it produces 1 generic mana to your mana pool. But if you go ahead and you tap an untapped legendary permanent you control, you can go ahead and untap this, which inherently means you can go ahead and produce more mana, or your legendary permanents go ahead and they can tap for 1. Depends on however you want to go ahead and say it. But this is really good now, and I argue incredibly good and incredibly overlooked ever since Planeswalkers became legendary. Before, this is only really good in like a Captain Sisay deck, or for making your commander tap for, 1 mana.
Well, and as we've seen, there are more legendary permanents these days. There's legendary enchantments, that creatures and not creatures, the legendary auras, and even legendary equipments and artifacts. So yeah, this is a really kind of interesting card. And the Planeswalkers, I didn't even consider, but that's very true.
Oh,
when are you ever going to care
friends.
if Planeswalkers become tapped? Except for
Gideons.
a small handful.
The ones that animate themselves. But also, this can go ahead and make it so legendary lands that don't produce mana now can.
Like Maze of Ith can produce mana. How about that? Yeah.
Well, Maze of Ith isn't legendary.
Oh, is it not? Well,
No.
whatever. I'm
I
sure
was
there are
thinking
other
more
ones
like a
that
tabernacle.
Yeah,
like,
that too. Yeah,
because that's usually the big thing on that.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't think a Cabal Coffers is legendary, but that would be a really good way to go
yeah.
ahead. You could tap that so it actually adds to your mana count. But either way, there are many more things out there that are legendary than you may think. And this is something, just again, it's 3 mana for 1, but it should be more than just 1 that you're getting out of this.
Yeah, very interesting card. I like that.
So take note. I'm putting it out there as a project, kind of. It's going to go ahead. Projection, sorry, that's the word I'm trying to muster out of my illiteracy. Pretty much, it is a card that I would say is a projection that will go up in value, just for the fact that we are seeing more and more legendaries. But
agreed.
Nothing more else to say beyond that.
Well,
actually, one thing, the gods actually who need the devotion to be turned on to use them, you can now actually use them for mana.
Oh yeah, I was saying, gods are definitely in there.
But you're number 1, Kyle. Sorry.
All right, no, it's all right. My number 1, again, we're going to make this very brief because this card speaks for itself. Number 1 on my list had to be Sakura Tribe Elder. Because what else can you say about this card, really? It's a 1/1 for 2 mana. Again, Snake Shaman. So it's ironic, one of the least supported creature types in the game gets one of the best creatures in the game. Sacrifice itself, search your deck for a basic land, put it into play tapped. That's all there is to it. Again, I'm not sure, honestly, whether a Kodamas Reach or this is better. You could argue this is better because it's a creature.
It can block.
Right. However, it doesn't get you 2 lands. It only gets you 1. But you could have this debate all day. But the bottom line is, Sakura Tribe Elder is one of the best screen cards in the entire game. It just is.
Yeah, because since for you newer players out there, if a creature doesn't have trample, this can go ahead and block anything that's a 10/10 or higher, and no damage will be dealt, and you can go ahead and make it so you effectively stop that damage and have tutored a land into play that you probably need. It's just so good. It's better than a Rampant Growth for that factor alone.
Yeah.
It's recurable from the grave. It can be used in so many more scenarios than just a generic sorcery for that regard. It's tutorable, goes in tribal, goes out in tribal, just good green.
Yeah. And
CMC.
And a Magic card is beloved when it gets its own nickname, and this guy is called Steve by those in the know.
I did not even know that, but sure, why not?
Just like Grey Merchant is called Gary. It's like I said, it's a thing. So long story. But
We
yeah.
were disagreeing on so many things this episode. I don't even know where to begin. Another poll. Have you ever heard this thing called Steve? Or gray merchant known as Gary?
Oh, of course they.
So
come on.
we'll just say it like a yes, oh yeah, and God no. But geez, all right, I'm broken on this. Either way, thank you for watching this. This is concluding our part 2 of the Hidden Gems. We're going to have our third part come out, which is going to address the money cards that we were not allowed to talk about for this set and say why those are so good. I mean, pretty sure you've probably seen them, but there are some out there that you might have forgotten.
Yes, indeed. And in the meantime, you can, of course, follow us on our social media channels. We have Reddit, we have Facebook, we have Twitter. We're on Tapped Out with our deck lists of all kinds. And you can also email us. You can find us on all of these at the handle, The Card Pool. So,
and also don't
please
forget,
do.
we have officially became affiliated with TCG Player, so if you do shop there, be sure to check out the link. It'll support our channel and our future videos to come, which will be totally awesome. But until then, I'm Stu.
And I'm Kyle.
And we'll see you next time at the Card Pool. You are so wrong about that enchantment.
Oh, and you don't even know Steve? Come on, man.
I know a guy named Steve.
Oh, my God.